Good evening, everyone. It's Dr. Shiva. We're going to have a discussion, a biology discussion today, systems biology discussion on how cloves affect the immune system. So first of all, some of you may know that we actually have a site you can go to, BeEnslaved.com. And I've done many things in the world, including creating email, which was a system. But one of the things that I'm very, very proud of my latest invention is Cytosolve, cytosolve.com. And what is Cytosolve? Well, Cytosolve came out back in 2007 after my recognition that if you look at what's happening in biology, biology is moving beyond just the genomic understanding of biology. So there was a time that people thought what made us humans was just the fact that you had a bunch of genes. And it turns out that's not true. Everyone thought that because genes were everything, in the 90s when they looked at a worm, we knew a worm had around 20,000 genes. So when they started the Human Genome Project, the assumption was, wow, genes are what makes humans humans, so we must have at least 1 million genes. And what you see in this diagram that's quite interesting is that it turns out that was a fallacy because they didn't take a systems approach. What you find here is that here's the estimate. This was around, now it's 1990, around 100,000 genes. Turns out we only have around 20,000 genes. We have the same number of genes as a worm. That's what we have, okay? So this led to a different field called systems biology. And systems biology said, look, we need to start understanding the whole body, and it's not just the genes over here, it's the proteins. Genes create proteins, proteins affect cells. To basically understand the whole, we have to understand all of this. So in 2003, I came back to MIT, and one of the grand challenges was, imagine, could we model the whole human cell? So here's a cell. Imagine being able to model all the chemical reactions in the human cell, because then we could really start understanding without killing animals. If I took cloves or you took a particular ingredient, how would it affect all these chemical reactions? So I just want to tell you the revolution here is if you could look at all the literature written on, let's say, cloves and the immune system, mathematically model it on the computer. Now you use a computer as a way to understand stuff long before you waste time in the lab. Now, this was thought of as a impossible problem, but that became the basis of my thesis in MIT during 2003 to 7 when I came back to do my PhD work. And what you can see here, if you look at the cell here, any little piece of the cell, it's called a molecular pathway. So these are little molecular pathway reactions. So you could read one paper in science and it'll have one of these ball and stick diagrams. Some people are starting to convert these to mathematical models, as I'm showing over here. Well, the issue then becomes, if all of these are becoming models, how do you interconnect models? So that's when I created Cytosolve. Cytosolve said, look, let's break this up into a bunch of models from models 1 to could be infinity. I created a technology which allowed us to integrate these systems of mathematical models. So that means you could literally take very complex stuff like this and you could mathematically model it with Cytosolve. And over the last 15 years, we've literally created an environment, a technology environment for enabling what I say truth, freedom, and help, because it's a decentralized environment. It's inclusive, it's transparent, it's open, it's personalized. We can literally take knowledge from the literature, run it through Cytosolve, and we can figure out, based on the known science today, whether something actually works. So what that means is we're not going to cherry pick, okay? Like what Fauci and other people do, unfortunately. We don't take that approach. We literally can look at, so what we can definitively say is, if you want to understand how cloves affect the immune system, we can look all of the knowledge at that point, extract it, and we go through a very diligent process to understand the effects. So for example, we have this whole process in a collaborative way for understanding it. And that was published, that whole methodology was published. It's a very well-known paper. It's out in the scientific literature. Now, getting to cloves, there are nearly 3,326 articles written on cloves over the past 74 years, okay? And that's around 22 clinical trials. So imagine I asked you, okay, Ken, tell me, do cloves affect the immune system? How would you do it? You'd have to go research all of those papers, right? Mm-hmm. Ken would have to literally go through all of these papers. He'd have to read them, understand them to figure out what was going on, okay? What occurs in science, unfortunately, is that people don't do that, right? What they do is they do cherry picking like the blind man. So if the elephant represents the effect of cloves on the immune system, you could have one guy just go looking at a few papers, the tail, right? And saying, oh, cloves don't do anything. In this case, a blind man thinks the tail's a brush. or this blind man thinks that the elephant is a tree because he's bumped into the leg, or this guy thinks it's a spear. This is a famous story of the blind men who are looking at the elephant and they don't really know what they're looking at, okay? So in science, this happens where someone could look at only one of these articles or 10 of them, say, oh, cloves have no effect. And that's what the pharmaceutical industry is doing right now, because they don't want to really look at all of the literature, because it may actually say, wow, I could get pain relief on gums by taking clove oil, for example, okay? Or I could boost the immune system. So they don't want to take a systems approach. What they want to do is they want to take a reductionist approach. And that's what the blind men here are doing, okay? The blind men here are taking a reductionist approach. They just go read one article or 5 articles. By the way, this approach to a systems approach, I put into the classic book, System and Revolution. It's really the basis of the course we teach. Every Monday nights I teach it. It's online, and I'll come back more to it. But it's the systems approach that's really going to help us understand how we get out where we get to truth. Those of you, by the way, who sign up on VA/Shiva/join and you become a supporter, you get the online book access, and you get access to another tool called Your Body, Your System. But this is really the textbook of really understanding how you can take a systems approach. And that's the way I look at politics. That's the way people like Ken are being trained. That's the way we have close to 5,000 truth, freedom, health warriors. People are being now trained to take a systems approach. This is how we break the bond of left and right, pro-Trump, anti-Trump, Republican, Democrat, because we can go to the source of truth. So the approach I'm going to share with you that we're applying to understand whether cloves affect the immune system or not is the same approach you can find out, what is a real solution to solving the election fraud issues, right? How do we really win medical freedom? You can take the same approach. So let me go back to this. So what we do at Cytosolve is we can literally take those 3,000 pieces of literature at the top of the funnel. We can then distill them down to the ones that were actually peer-reviewed, right? We can then extract the molecular pathways. Then we create a systems architecture, and then we can find out what the hell is actually going on, okay? And then we actually publish this stuff. So we take this very distillation process, but scientific process, Cytosolve allows us to do that. Just to let you know, the pharmaceutical industry, the way they develop drugs right now is they just simply find a compound. They don't use this approach. They don't use Cytosolve, okay? Which we're going to get to. They just take a compound, throw it in a test tube. Well, it looks like it's doing something. Then they go kill a bunch of animals for 3 or 4 years. This takes around 6 years. Then if the FDA approves them to go do clinical trials, they do small sets of humans, large sets, etc. And this process takes around $5 billion, 13 years. And by the way, the drug that comes out may not actually heal you, okay? It can actually have lots and lots of side effects. And in fact, what's happening in pharmaceutical right now, pharmaceutical companies are spending more and more money over R&D, and less of their drugs are even being allowed by the FDA. They're losing money like crazy. This is why vaccines are their goal, because vaccines, guess what? They don't need to go through all this rigorous testing. They don't even need to go to pharmaceutical grade testing. They spend a lot of money because this is a very stringent process. So I thought pharma would want to use this. So I said, look, don't kill animals, use Cytosolve. Well, we work with a couple of them. They validated its use, but we were actually showing their stuff wasn't working. So that's a problem for them. But anyway, this is where pharma's at. So what Cytosolve does is we can literally take compounds, we can run it through our technology long before we do cells. So we save all this time. It's no different than how airplanes are built. We don't just throw a pilot, we do it right on the computer. So let me give you an example of Cytosolve's power. So for example, when I grew up in India, these guys would be mixing herbs. And if you asked them, hey, why are you putting so much of this or that? And this is a problem with a lot of the nutraceutical industry right now. If you go to buy vitamins at GNC or places, and you look at them and you say, how did you come up with that formulation? Oh, a lot of hand waving. With Cytosolve, we can actually do the mathematical analysis to find out how this ingredient affects, that ingredient affects, and how you put them together to get the right combination. In fact, we'll be talking about it. We have always helped a lot of companies with their products, but recently we found 2 very powerful ingredients. When you put them together, has a very powerful effect for inflammation. We're going to be releasing that called MV25. But by way of example, this is not stuff we put in MV25, but what I'm going to share with you is when you look at this process, what we're able to do with Cytosolve is we're able to, for example, let's assume you take curcumin, which is if you take turmeric, we're literally able to take turmeric, curcumin, and look at all the pathways of inflammation curcumin has. So here, the outer circle is a cell wall. This is a nuclear wall. All these balls and lines and diagrams here are all chemicals. And we're able to see how does curcumin interact. And then we're able to mathematically model that. So curcumin comes from a rhizome called turmeric. And if you get the red skin, the skin of red grapes, that has something called resveratrol. We can also see how resveratrol affects inflammation. And we can see how they do it in combination. So here, we're looking at this far right column is a cytokine, which is inflammation. So 0.15 means which have high levels of inflammation. We're not giving any curcumin, any resveratrol. Then what we do is, so you have high inflammation. Then we just give curcumin alone. And guess what? When we mathematically model, we find out that the inflammation drops from 0.15 to 0.05. Everyone see that? Then when we just give resveratrol alone with cytosol, we find out we went from 0.15 to 0.06. Not as good as curcumin here. But then watch what happens when we combine them. It's called a synergistic effect. That's why foods are powerful. I reduce the amount of curcumin from 5 to 3, from resveratrol from 5 to 2. So here's a 60% reduction, 40%. But when you combine them together, you get even more reduction in that inflammatory cytokine. This is a power food, okay? So what we did here, when we looked at cloves, we applied cytosol. We took a systems approach. We wanted to take a systems approach to understand how cloves affect the immune system, all right? So we understand all the chemical reactions in the immune system, and then we want to get to the truth of how do cloves actually affect it. Now, today on Facebook and YouTube and all these things, they're just throwing off people. Well, cytosol can get to the scientific source of truth, and if these guys wanted to do real fact checking, they would use cytosol. So what are cloves? I have some in my cabinet. By the way, I use cloves all the time. I make a lot of, if you make chai tea, I take the cloves, and maybe I'll do it. I've done how to make chai tea, but I grind the chai tea in my mortar and pestle, and you put it in. Cloves has a lot of very, very valuable effects. Let me go through them. So cloves is a spice that's used in food preservation in traditional systems of medicine. Just to give you a note, in India, when my grandmother or my mom would buy a bag of rice, you know, by the way, even now, if you go buy bags of rice, if you leave it too long, you'll start getting worms coming in there or bugs. So in typical, if you buy a bag of rice, or in India, we would take a bunch of cloves and mix it in with that rice. Why? Because as you can see, cloves support the preservation. It's a food preservative, right? It keeps away all the bugs, okay? Just like if you take it in your mouth, oral health, it supports you. It's also indigenous to the Maluku Islands in Indonesia, and now it's cultivated across the world, right? So cloves originally came from the Maluku Islands in Indonesia, which is the Asia Pacific. Now, its medicinal benefits are attributed to the dried flower buds as well as the leaves. And the earliest documented evidence dates back to 2,200 years ago. So about 2,200 years ago, people were really started using cloves. So it's a long time ago. It looks like a flower pod. There you see it right there, right? And you can get these in any store. Typically, I get them whole and I grind them because it's a lot more potent. But that's what cloves look like. And you have a couple of them in my hand, right there, right? And you can grind these up and you can put them in. You can also get the powder. I highly recommend, if you're getting herbs, get the whole herbs. Use your mortar and pestle because you get a lot more of the volatile oils. You can buy them in powder, but I don't think they're as potent. The cloves have a couple things. They have vitamins, they have essential oils, and again, when you get them fresh, you get more of the essential oils. They have fiber and they have minerals, okay? Vitamins, essential oils, fiber, and minerals. Now, the significant source of fiber, about 340 milligrams in 1 gram of clove. It's a lot of fiber there. Most abundant minerals, you have about 0.63 to 1 gram of calcium. Potassium, 1 milligram to 1 gram of potassium. And it's the most abundant vitamins in cloves are vitamin A, 160 IUs in 100 grams, vitamin E, 8.82 in 100 grams, and vitamin K, about 141 micrograms, okay? To give you an idea, there are many, many molecules in cloves. So remember, an herb like these cloves or any herb that you have in your home, it's not a pharmaceutical drug. A pharmaceutical drug is actually a single molecule. Like imagine you just had one of these molecules, okay? This is eugenol acetate, but in pharmaceutical drugs, they're not even chemicals that appear in nature. So unlike these molecules, which your body over thousands of years is aware of, the molecules that pharmaceutical companies use don't even exist in nature. They create them. It's called synthetic molecules. But these are the different molecules that are in cloves. So let me walk through them. So you have eugenol, Okay, so the clove flower bud contains up to 18% of the essential oils. A total of 36 essential oils are identified in cloves so far. And the major essential oils are eugenol, 88%. It's the number one. Eugenol acetate, 5.5%. And beta carotene, okay, 1.5%. So these are the major ones. There could be others, but eugenol being the most important one. What are the biological effects? If you look at that 3,000 piece of literature, people say they have an antioxidant effect, anti-ulcer effect, antimicrobial effect, anti-proliferative effect, anti-diabetic effect, anti-inflammatory effect. So a lot of varied values. This is why in in traditional cultures, you'll find that cloves are typically used. We use it in chai tea. You use it when we make lamb curry. You use it in a lot of different oils. You make clove oil out of it. You can use it, as I mentioned, as an antiseptic or on your mouth to stop, pain. It's a great pain reliever. Now, here are the health benefits. Okay, by the way, these are the biological benefits, meaning these are what they have at the molecular systems level, and these are what you would see for health. Cancer, a lot of articles written on that, nausea, burn and wound healing, diabetes, periodontitis, and pain. These two sort of go together, toothaches and periodontitis. Now, to review, I want to really, first of all, because we're going to talk about cloves on the immune system. Remember, the old model of the immune system is you get a pathogen, it hits the innate immune system, which is the part of your immune system that's in your mouth, that's in your eyes. It's everything that in your gut that the pathogen comes to. And then this other part of your immune system is your adaptive immune system, which creates antibodies. And the goal of a vaccine is to not even deal with this and inject something called either a deadened particle, now they're doing mRNA, that it generates antibodies. This is the old model of the immune system. This is actually a much more accurate model of the immune system. And this architecture of the immune system says, look, there's an interferon system, there's a microbiome and virome, the adaptive. So the immune system is a lot more complex, and you can see other videos on it. So what we've done is when we looked at all these complexities of the immune system, we started looking with Cytosolve at what cloves affect. Well, first of all, cloves modulate the immune response through controlling inflammatory cytokines and inflammatory enzymes. So just keep that in mind. So what we've discovered was from our looking at all that scientific work, cloves modulate, which means they're like shock absorbers. They modulate the cytokine storm and they modulate the inflammatory enzymes. But cloves also exhibit a very, very strong antiviral effect, antibacterial effect, antifungal effect, and antiprotozoal effect, right? So that's all the pathogens, viruses, bacteria, fungi, and protozoa. So how do they do this? So I'm going to now walk you from a molecular systems approach how this happens. So here's eugenol. Okay, so eugenol, that's 88% of cloves. So we're going to focus on that chemical. And now what eugenol does inhibits enzymes such as COX-2 and 5-LOX that produce inflammatory cytokines. So you see, here's your inflammatory cytokines where you get the cytokine storm, and here are the things that cause pain and inflammation. COX-2 and 5-LOX are the things that lead to PGE2 and LTB4, which are the things that lead to pain and inflammation. So what does cloves do? It stops these. I had some dental work done, and it was aching. I just took a little bit of drops. You have to be careful with clove oil, right? Diluted, and bang, it completely stopped the pain. But be very careful, okay? You got to read about it, okay? By the way, this is what Advil does. So some of you, unfortunately, have to take Advil. Advil is a COX-2 inhibitor. Advil stops that pathway. But remember, Advil goes everywhere throughout your whole body. With the clove oil, if you have a pain in a particular area, you can put it on that pain in a very localized way. That's the advantage of it, okay? Advil, you can't just put it on that spot, okay? You take it internally, it hits everything. Point is that eugenol goes and blocks COX-2 and 5-LOX, which make sure that these enzymes don't go creating these pro-inflammatory cytokines, PGE2 and LTB4. So it's like, boom, it stops it, you don't get these. The second thing eugenol does, so eugenol inhibits this transcription factor. There's NF-kappa beta, which is the thing that causes a cytokine storm through these 3 inflammatory genes, IL-10, IL-1 beta, and IL-6. So if you want to learn a little bit of chemistry here, IL-1, these 3 cytokines, this is If you're at a dinner party, you can say, oh yeah, IL-10 at 1, IL-1 beta, and IL-6, okay? These three things are the ones that create the cytokine storm. And what does eugenol do? It goes and blocks NF-kappa beta, all right? It literally shunts that off so you do not get the cytokine storm taking place. I hope that makes sense. So that's what it's doing right here, okay? NF-kappa beta is blocked by eugenol. So that's how it modulates the inflammatory enzymes, these guys, and the inflammatory cytokines. The next thing we're going to talk about is eugenol also has a very powerful antiviral effect, okay? And you can see that here. So if here's a virus, and remember, what happens is when a virus takes over your host cell, the virus is replicating its DNA. Remember we talked about that? The virus starts replicating its DNA, and it uses what's called viral DNA polymerase to support that. So viral DNA polymerase is an enzyme that the virus uses that's essential for replication of viral DNA in the host cell. So the virus gets in and starts using this viral DNA polymerase. Well, guess what eugenol does? Quite amazing. Eugenol inhibits the viral DNA polymerase enzyme, thereby stopping viral DNA synthesis and viral replication. And here are all the papers that we distilled that show that. And eugenol is effective against influenza A virus, herpes simplex 1 and 2, and hepatitis C virus. All right. Again, this is in the literature, and the references are here. So eugenol is effective against influenza, herpes simplex 1 and 2, and hepatitis C. I mean, I take tons of cloves, by the way, in food. Best way, by the way, to take this stuff, I mean, you can take it as a pill, but I encourage all of you to learn from traditional systems of medicine. The more you can incorporate it in the food, your body recognizes it. You know, it's not another pill you have to take, all right? So it's really important to start learning how to cook and go back to traditional healing methods. The other thing is eugenol also has an antibacterial effect. Now, why is this important? Some people are suffering with a lot of these very interesting bacteria, right? A Lyme, and you can go to all these different, spirochetes, right? All these different bacteria, candida. What happens is a lot of these bacteria hide under a biofilm. They literally create a wall of biofilm, and then they hide under it. And people will take antibiotics, and these things come back and forth. They never really knock these things out. And the reason is you have to break up the biofilm. And you can talk to a lot of people about this and to verify this. But what eugenol does, so biofilm, by the way, is sequential colonization bacteria in the tooth surface. So you have it in your mouth, okay? And eugenol from clove oil breaks up the biofilm. So it literally busts up that biofilm, and breaking up the biofilm inhibits the bacterial growth. Because what happens is these bacteria hide under their little dome, like they basically build a house, okay? And you're going in and basically crashing a big missile onto their house. And that's what the eugenol does. And eugenol is effective against E. coli, Salmonella, Staphylococcus, Listeria, monocytogenes, okay? So, you could use this for, clove oil. You can use it as a, disinfectant in your homes, okay? And I think there's some natural products coming out of that. But the reason I wanted to share this with you, what you see here, the way this works, it's actually breaking up that biofilm. And the other thing I want to talk is antifungal, as I promised, antiprotozoan response, okay? So here's eugenol. Here's a fungi, okay? So ergosterol, which is this thing right here, which is on the surface. So here's a fungi protozoa. On their wall is a critical component of the fungal protozoal cell wall. Guess what eugenol does? Eugenol inhibits the synthesis of ergosterol, leading to the destabilization of the fungal protozoan cell wall and eventually death. So what you're doing is you're literally, so remember, these fungi and protozoa have to use your body's machinery to manufacture their wall. It's like they're building their own wall. And ergosterol is the building block. It's like the bricks that builds their wall, okay? And what eugenol does, it breaks up the synthesis. So they got to go make the bricks to build their cell wall, the bacteria. Eugenol comes in and it stops the synthesis of ergosterol. That's what we're seeing right here. And so therefore, eugenol is effective against candida. By the way, I'm sorry, candida is a fungal protozoan, not a bacteria. A yeast, Asparagus niger. These are very familiar types of antifungal protozoans. So eugenol is very effective against that. But you're seeing from our analysis, it actually is breaking up this chemical ergosterol formation. Let me just take a quick break now. Maybe this is a good time. Okay, I'll come back to the dosaging. I want to, before I finish up, I want to encourage everyone, because the platform that we're building is supported by you. We are creating a platform, as I mentioned. Let me go take a quick break here and talk about what we're building here. As I mentioned, if you go to vashiva.com/join, because we are building a movement for truth, freedom, and health. And as a part of this movement, what I've done is we are taking all of our technology, all of our data center that we own, and on this data center platform, people can contribute. We're putting in new hardware, we're buying new UPSs, but you can join the community. And when you join, we don't want you to just give us money, not and say, oh, maybe Shiva will do something. When you give us money, I want to give you back something. So we give you all the tools for the Warrior program. For those people who want to contribute and be supportive. Those people want to just get the book and Your Body, Your System. I'll talk about this very powerful tool. Your Body, Your System is a tool that allows you to ask yourself a set of questions, and using engineering systems theory, I will actually calculate what kind of system you are. That's the red dot. Then it figures out the black dot, which is how you are disturbed from your current state of existence, your health. And then it helps you figure out what are the right foods, the right supplements, the right yoga exercises that are right for you. And by the way, everyone's different. This is why we say be happy, be you. It's personalized approach to your health. But again, this is a tool to understand systems principles. So if you go again to vashiva.com/join, you will recognize that all of these tools are available to you. Before I finish up with the cloves, the dosaging, etc., that you should consider, is let me just play the video here. This will give you a deep understanding, for those of you who are new, of what is this movement that we're building. Here we go. We have allowed our country to be taken over from within, and the end goal is you will have a homogenized world where we will become slaves, because there is a condition among the elites that really thinks they're better than you, deep down inside them, that you don't deserve the freedoms you have. They don't. This reality is what people need to wake up to, and we need to all unite, working people. There's only one movement that can do that, and that is the movement that we started creating here in Massachusetts, the movement for truth, freedom, and health. Look, I've been a student of politics since I was a 4-year-old kid, studying revolutionary movements, left wing, right wing. There's a physics, there's a nuclear science to destroying the establishment. To build a bridge, you need to understand Newton's equation. You need to understand the laws of gravity. You need to understand Poisson's ratio. There is a way to build a revolution, and that's why I put this together. My goal is to train an army of truth, freedom, and health leaders. We don't need followers like social media. We need leaders, but they need training, because the educational system does not teach them history, nothing. So in 3 hours, that's what I've started doing. That's the solution. We got to train people. First, with understanding what a system is. The second is understanding the interconnection between truth, freedom, and health. Freedom is the ability to move freely, communicate freely, right? Talk freely. Without freedom, you cannot convert ideas, hypothesis into truth, which is science. And without freedom, you can't really get to truth. And without truth, you make up fake problems and fake solutions, which means you destroy our health. And without health, which is the infrastructure of us and our body, you can't fight for freedom. Third concept is it has to be bottoms up. Working people, people who work uniting. And what the right wing has done is whenever you say working people unite, that must be communist. Meanwhile, they've let the Democrats run unions, which suppress workers, completely corrupt. But when you look at the arc of American history, it's been when working people came up. We need to go local. Every solution I'm coming up with as a part of this movement, we're giving the science, which is the truth, and then we tell people what they can do on the ground. Like with election fraud, you don't need to wait for some lawyer. Our goal is to train people, Dave, to go local, to go local, to go local, fight locally. Forget lawyers, forget politicians, forget celebrities. You got to learn politics, and there is a science to it. They lock us down, we should be ready to shut them down. And the fourth part of this principle is a not so obvious establishment. So when you look at a system, there's always something that disturbs you from getting to your goal. Well, the biggest disturbance is a not so obvious establishment, which are those people who claim they're for you, on the left and the right. The Al Sharptons who tell black people I'm for you. The Tucker Carlsons. Do you think any true anti-establishment person will ever be on Fox or CNN? I don't think so. They both mislead working people back into the establishment. Without this solid understanding of political physics and theory, you're screwed. You're going to follow on the left wing, Bernie Sanders. Oh, he said something. Or Robert Kennedy. Scumbags. or you're going to follow, some right-wing talk show host. They're not going to lead us to liberation. It's us. And that political physics, it's a nuclear science of change, bottoms up. We have to organize to understand that there is people who talk a good game and then look at what they actually do, left and right. I'm sorry, Sean Hannity may say some good things, but I don't see the urgency in his voice to get something done, and it can only come when you weaponize yourself with the right knowledge. You need to be able to identify a rat. Christ didn't go after the Romans, right? It was the Pharisees and the Sadducees who screwed him up. His own quote-unquote people. And that's where we're at. So these 4 concepts I've built into a curriculum. People can go to BeAShiva.com, and it's an educational program. We need to train people in political theory. You need to have physics, and I've created that curriculum. People need to get educated. We need to get educated fast. And within a half an hour, I can teach people. 2 years of MIT control systems, I teach people those concepts. Then I apply it, anyone can understand it. And then you say, oh, I got to build a bottoms-up movement. They have to get politically astute, and then they have to go locally and act, not sit there on social media. They have to act locally, defy locally, do civil obedience locally, but with knowledge on how to build a movement. The Senate campaign's expanded to the Movement for Truth, Freedom, and Health, and they can find it on V as in Victor, A, Shiva, VAShiva.com, so people can sign in. They can get access to a bunch of videos. If they want to take a course and become a Truth, Freedom, and Health leader, I offer a full scholarship there. But we want people to make a commitment that they'll study, that they'll get certified, that they'll go do activities on the ground. So go to VAShiva, Victory America Shiva, VAShiva.com. So let's finish this up. And by the way, every Monday evenings, I do the live course. Last week, we had about 140 people on. So our goal is to have about 50,000 Truth, Freedom, and Health warriors trained. But the bottom line is without the science, without the training, people are just going to be involved in this left-right nonsense. And we want to break people from that adolescence. So let's go back. So what is the dosaging, and what does the literature say? The big disclaimer, we're not here giving medical advice. Everyone should go consult their doctors, et cetera. But this is what the literature says. So if you look at all that literature, maintenance dose, 2 to 3 cloves per day. Well, you can easily throw 2 to 3 cloves in some chai tea you're making, okay? Pound it, throw it in as you're making, or in some food, okay? Antiseptic use. And this comes from Ilwakil, 2007. It's 1% clove oil cream, right? If you're using it as an antiseptic. For oral pain, you can get the clove oil gel. This is Al-Karir, right? 2 to 3 volume to volume with glycerin, right? So that could be like an oil or some fat, right? So which means you want 2 parts clove oil to 3 parts another oil, right? So it's 2 to 3. And you can look at some of if you have a pain, some of them come in alcohol form, some of them come in oil in terms of what you, let's say you have a toothache or a tooth pain, what you drop on it, and it has immediate numbing effects. The other thing I wanted to share with you is, as I mentioned, Your Body, Your System, which is a tool, by the way, that I mentioned is a very powerful tool that came out of my work where I was literally trying to connect Eastern and Western systems of medicine. You see, from an engineering systems approach, you could look at the body as an engineering system, which is what we teach people in Foundations of System. There are the forces called transport, conversion, and storage. It's not going to make a lot of sense to you, but just think about there's 3 levers which define your body. Transport is the motion of information, matter, and energy. Conversion is the conversion of information, matter, and energy, and storage. Some people convert very well. People metabolize, have good digestion. Other people talk very fast. People transport, right? Other people are sort of larger people with big frames, the storage and the structure. So and that comes from general systems theory. In the Indian system of medicine, they call transport, conversion, and storage Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. So in my Fulbright work, I was able to interconnect Eastern and Western medicine, and I created a tool called Your Body, Your System. But if you look at cloves, so everything I shared with you was from the Western systems biology approach. You can also look at what cloves do to the forces of transport, conversion, and storage. That's what I wanted to share with you here. And if you take the course, you'll understand this better. But what cloves do, so cloves reduce transport, right? They numb things, right? So pain, what is pain? A lot of movement and right? So cloves lower that. They lower transport, okay? Which is reduce vata. They increase pitta, right? So they increase digestive processes. That's why cloves are good. They're really, really good for a good digestion, right? That's why Indians and a lot of traditional cultures add that. And they reduce kapha. What is kapha? Like mucus in your lungs, right? Things that make you feel heavy. They break up stuff. That's what the conversion process does. So you can understand this from an Eastern, or what I call from a systems approach, how cloves work. So if here's your body, let's say your body gets deranged and you're moving into this transport range where you're moving around, you're jittery, cloves will help calm this. That's why I think, Ken, you said you used to, I'm not saying you should recommend this, you used to do clove cigarettes, right? Yeah. Not recommending this to anyone, okay? But people are very nervous or something, which is high vata. People who transport, cloves can have the effect of quieting them down. So there you go. So in summary, what you've learned here is that, number one, cloves modulate the immune system by inhibiting inflammatory cytokines and enzymes, right? That's what the eugenol does. Eugenol from cloves stops viral replication by inhibiting the DNA viral replication process. Eugenol from cloves prevents bacterial growth by destroying the protective biofilm. And then eugenol from cloves controls fungal and protozoal infection by destabilizing the cell walls. And then if you look what you take the Eastern approach, or the systems approach, eugenol or cloves lower transport, support pitta, which is digestive processes, and they break up mucus and these kinds of things, okay? So you've gotten the Eastern and the Western approach right here on VA Shiva. So I hope that's been helpful. And if you go to vashiva.com/live, you can literally listen. So I'm live on VA Shiva, okay? And this is in our own video platform that we're running. And this has been brought to you by all the support and contributions people are making. We are growing our own platform, so we're not relying on YouTube. We're not relying on anyone else. But when you sign in, you get access to all of the videos here because we don't want them getting taken down on platforms. You get access to your body, your system right here. You can just click on this link right here. It's in the dashboard. You have all the courses are up here. You can then take the courses. You can actually go in and take an exam and get certified, okay, if you want to go down through the certification process. So all of that is accessible here, and you can enter the course. The courses are there. The videos are there, everyone. So please take advantage of this. This is really brought to you by you, supported by you. Join our movement for truth, freedom, and health. We are building essentially a parallel universe here. We're going to fight the establishment. We're going to expose them with science. But one of the most important things we need to do is we need to create our own system here. We don't need to wait for them. We're going to create solutions here so we all win. Thank you, everyone. Be the light. Thank you.